I'm Anonymous Cubed. I'm a detective and a paranormal investigator, and recently I had to look into the mysteries surrounding the Order of the Unblinking Eye. The Order of the Unblinking Eye started out as a small Anglican church in northern Manitoba. 3 years into his tenure as pastor to the local community, Father Ernest Myers reportedly began having strange dreams, which he later revealed to his parishioners were in fact conversations with an angelic being of the Lord who wanted Father Ernest to pass on the good words of God Almighty in the heavenly choir. But of course, that's not what Father Ernest was in contact with. There's little doubt of that now. It's said that Father Ernest's dreams had begun shortly after he'd acquired an ancient holy text through an online auction. Like many in his calling, Father Ernest was a collector of rare and unusual holy books, which is how he came into possession of the Book of Lost Dreams. Rumored to have been written sometime in the 7th century, the Book of Lost Dreams was a collection of bizarre occultist rituals from around the world. The author was a self-declared magician who'd spent his life traveling far and wide and making some pretty outlandish claims. Among the many convoluted writings in the book was a passage which would become extremely important to Father Ernest. This was the passage that made mention of methods by which one might contact the other-sided ones, an angelic host of beings from beyond the dimensions of eternal dreaming. Reportedly, there were symbols and phrases in the book which, when invoked, would summon the presence of the speaker for the other-sided ones. And it is thought that it was this being which Father Ernest summoned into his dreams and began conversing with. During the next 16 years, Father Ernest would write 32 books, 26 of which were what he considered his holy texts, detailing the relationship he had with a mysterious figure referred to as Brother Bartholomew. The other 6 books were mystery novels about a detective named Hardboiled Harry Strong, and they were all pretty awful. Brother Bartholomew, Father Ernest explained, was a seraph, a member of the highest order of angels who had once sat at the right hand of God. Now, Brother Bartholomew had come to earth to act as the will of the Creator, to bless Father Ernest and his followers. But who was Brother Bartholomew really? Evidence in Father Ernest's own books would suggest that Brother Bartholomew was in fact Jimmy Six Hands Malone, a small-time con artist from a nightmare region of the generalized psychosphere. A creature which had existed almost purely in imaginary terms for the past few millennia, exiled from our level of existence, but perhaps had finally found a way to bring itself back into our world properly. It was while working with Brother Bartholomew, or Jimmy Six Hands, that Father Ernest began to convert the churchgoers to a new religion. He began by lacing his regular sermons with more and more existential concepts, and by encouraging his followers to transcribe their dreams on what was later revealed to be microdoses of LSD, which Father Ernest was acquiring from a local high school student, Big Albert Hoskins, who was himself most likely getting the hits through a more competent drug dealer in one of the neighboring cities. Within a few years, the Order of the Unblinking Eye had been officially formed, and it was after that, locals would state, that things began to get a little weird. First, there was the parties, which were quickly revealed to be socially transgressive orgies involving animal masks, latex gloves, and a distressing amount of salad dressing. But then the singing started, at which point things escalated in a fashion which would have been difficult to anticipate. The singing involved the 58 members of the Order of the Unblinking Eye working in shifts to ensure that all hours of the day and night there were at least 6 people singing in the middle of the town. For the next 7 weeks, 24 hours a day, throughout all forms of weather, they sang a single song. They sang a song in praise of an unknowable force that moved through them, that it might allow them to better know the universe itself. And they sang a song in praise of their leader, Father Ernest. And they sang of how times were going to change, and all the others who'd mocked them were going to be real sorry. It was a confusing song, often shouted in atonal bursts resembling glossalia or Tourette's syndrome. And after a while, it really began to get on everybody's nerves, even the singers, it seemed. So finally, on Wednesday, March 18th, 1986, at exactly 12:30 in the afternoon, Patrick Johnson, an out-of-work dog walker, went to the town square and proceeded to batter 3 of the singers with a homemade cattle prod, which turned out to just be some sticks in a plastic bag. The singers all survived, and Johnson was taken into custody and charged with making an unpleasant situation slightly worse. That night, the entire Order of the Unblinking Eye showed up downtown to raise their voices in song. And that's when the pandemonium really kicked off. Witnesses say it appeared that the entire group was quite upset, though many in very different ways. Some seemed on the edge of enragement, while others were wrapped with joy and sorrow, seemingly simultaneously. Once properly assembled, they began to sing their song, the same song they'd been singing for every hour of every day for the past 7 weeks. And then, in the midst of it, as a single group, they stopped, turned away from each other, and began to tear the town down. From inside their coats, they revealed crowbars and screwdrivers and hammers. And then they went to work. 35 people were injured, and while most of the injuries were fairly minor, skydiving enthusiast Ricky Stamps lost an eye and a thumb to a quick-moving claw hammer. The riot lasted exactly 23 minutes and caused just over $2.5 million in damage. It ended suddenly when every single one of the rioters, acting almost as a hive mind or a flock, stopped, put their crowbars or whatnot away, and went home. The next day, nobody talked about it at all. The next day, the townsfolk went to work trying to fix what was broken, and as they did, they made small talk about the weather, the local sports team, and the failings of various politicians. Nobody discussed what had happened the previous day. Those who were there for it say it was like the entire town was just holding its breath, waiting to see if a fart would blow past them. And then, at a little after 4 in the afternoon, came the blimps. Unbeknownst to the rest of the town, for the past 6 months, the Order of the Unblinking Eye had bought up a collection of antique blimps. It is unknown where the money came from. What is known is they were able to take advantage of prevailing wind conditions to fly directly over the city, at which point they released a barrage of damp, fecal matter. Witnesses say that the townsfolk went running, screaming in every direction, but few escaped the wrath of the Order of the Unblinking Eye. While it was over quickly, for a short few moments the entire sky was overtaken by a hailstorm of loose turds falling on the just and the unjust alike, from blimps. At this time, it becomes necessary to discuss the legend of Jimmy Six Hands Malone, who was, by Father Ernest's accounts, a real asshole of an extra-dimensional being. This whole religion thing, the sacred order, the cult, seemed to have just been a zany get-rich-quick scheme which had spiraled out of control due to Jimmy Six Hands having an addiction to a strange cosmic substance known as super cocaine. It's said that he came to our stage of reality seeking fortune and fame and his name up on the silver screen. The last time he'd been in our dimension and on our Earth was back when the dinosaurs were ruling. And if what Father Ernest wrote is true, there's a good chance that Jimmy Six Hands was responsible for killing the majority of them. So which identity was the real one? Brother Bartholomew, who sat with the highest order of angels in the heavenly light of the universal creator? Or Jimmy Six Hands Malone, some sort of sleazy bad dream with a runny nose and too many fingers? Most likely, we will never know, as in March of 1992, the entire order of the Unblinking Eye vanished from the town of Beecher's Hope and from the face of the earth, so far as we know. It wasn't all at once, but after a few days, the rest of the town realized that the order was gone. They departed, escaped, or at least changed their identities and gone into hiding. Only Father Ernest remained, now a drug-addled nightmare himself, doped up on dank kush and psychedelic mushrooms. He wanders his town, dressed in a tattered bathrobe which had once been frilly and pink but was now decidedly less so. Some folks, being charitable, give him change, but most leave him to his woefully piteous existence, pointing him out to their children to say, "Look there, little ones. There is a truly wretched soul." Brother Bartholomew, or Jimmy Six Hands Malone, changed his name to Jeremy Fixatopolanopus and moved out to Los Angeles, California, where he wrote the hit films Love and Extra-Dimensional Parasites and Maggots, Maggots, Your Eyes Are Full of Maggots. His agent did not return any of my calls. And that's the tale of the Order of the Unblinking Eye. Who were they? What did they want? Now you know a little, or at least you know a little more than you knew before. I'm Anonymous Cubed, and that's a case I was working on.